Welcome back to our channel. Today we bring you yet another captivating tale of a real-life drama told in story format. In this story, you will again journey with us to Africa, where an idyllic safari adventure turned into a horrific scene of terror. The best way to fully enjoy this real-life story is to kill the lights, put on your headphones, and sit back with your eyes closed so you can immerse yourself into the setting. If you have not done so yet, pause the video now, get yourself set up, and then press play to go along for the ride. And if you are one of the select few that enjoys a good story that is based on real-life events, smash that like button like it's a piñata full of confetti. Hit subscribe and ring the bell to make sure you're first in line for all our new content. We post every Friday and Sunday, and sometimes because we can't help ourselves during the week also. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy. The first light of dawn broke gently over the Selous Game Reserve on September 4th, 2015, casting a soft golden hue across the vast expanse of the Tanzanian wilderness. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the subtle scents of wet earth and the distant aroma of blooming acacias. Greg Gilbert, a seasoned safari guide with a reputation for his deep knowledge of the African bush, stirred from his slumber in the small, well-worn camp bed that had been his refuge for the past few weeks. Greg, a man in his mid-40s with sun-kissed skin and a rugged appearance, had built his life around his lifelong passion, the African bush. As Greg dressed in his safari attire, khaki shirt, durable trousers, and sturdy boots, the sky outside began to transform. Hues of pink and orange gradually gave way to the warm, golden light of day. He moved with a practiced ease, preparing for the day's game drive that promised excitement and discovery. His group for the day included two couples from the United Kingdom, Sarah and Tom, and Emily and Mark. They had all come with a shared sense of adventure and a thirst for the authentic African experience. As they gathered around the campfire for a quick breakfast, the conversation buzzed with excitement. Sarah, an enthusiastic photographer, was eager to capture the perfect shot of the elusive wildlife, while Tom, her partner, was keen on learning about animal behavior. Emily and Mark, the other couple, were nature lovers who had long dreamed of embarking on a safari. They marveled at the vastness of the landscape and the serenity that enveloped them. Greg, ever the storyteller, regaled them with tales of past safaris and his intimate encounters with Africa's majestic creatures, both docile and dangerous. The air was filled with the aroma of bacon, eggs, and freshly baked bread, and the soft clinking of cutlery provided a rhythmic backdrop to the morning's chatter. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the group was ready to embark on their early morning game drive, so they climbed aboard the rugged 4x4 safari vehicle, the canvas roof rustling slightly as it was drawn taut. Greg took his place at the wheel, his face illuminated by the soft light of dawn. As they drove out of the campsite, his voice, rich with enthusiasm, provided a running commentary on the day's itinerary and the wildlife they might encounter. The vehicle began its journey along the dusty tracks of the reserve, the landscape unfolding before them in a mesmerizing panorama of golden grasses and green bushes. The morning sun cast long shadows, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of the bush, occasionally interspersed with the musky aroma of animal dung. The vehicle's tires kicked up small clouds of dust, which the morning breeze carried away, leaving a crisp, clear view of the surrounding terrain. Greg pointed out herds of impalas, an abundant antelope species that can always be spotted not too far from the road, grazing in the patches of open grass, their graceful movements a testament to their agility and speed. The occasional sight of a pair of giraffes, their long necks reaching for the tender leaves of the acacia trees, added to the day's sense of wonder. Throughout the drive, Sarah's camera clicked away, capturing the fleeting moments of wildlife in their natural habitat, while Tom absorbed Greg's insights into animal behavior. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed higher in the sky, casting a warm, golden light across the savannah. The day had transitioned from the cool freshness of dawn to the vibrant heat of noon. Greg, ever the attentive guide, decided it was time to take the group to a nearby waterhole, an area known for its rich wildlife activity. The promise of observing animals in their natural habitat, quenching their thirst and interacting with each other, was an enticing prospect to all four of his guests. Greg pointed the vehicle in the direction they needed to go, and for the next 20 minutes or so, it rumbled along the dusty tracks, its tires kicking up small clouds of red earth that swirled lazily in the morning heat. As they approached the waterhole, Greg guided the vehicle to a vantage point where they could observe without disturbing the animals. The vehicle came to a gentle stop, and the group disembarked with a sense of eager anticipation. The heat of the day was palpable, the sun's rays creating shimmering heat waves that danced across the surface of the waterhole. Now it must be noted that this area where they stopped was not fenced in, and there were signs all over that people who choose to leave the relative safety of their vehicle do so at their own risk. Sarah, with her camera at the ready, was immediately captivated by the scene. She carefully adjusted her lens to capture the delicate moments of wildlife activity. Her excitement was evident in the way she focused intently, her fingers deftly adjusting settings as she aimed at a family of elephants drinking at the edge of the waterhole. The elephants, with their massive bodies and long trunks, created gentle waves as they dipped the tips of their trunks into the water, their soft, rumbling calls adding to the day's soundtrack. Tom, sitting beside Sarah, was equally engrossed. His eyes scanned the landscape, taking in the various animal species that came and went. He marveled at the elegance of the giraffes as they cautiously approached the waterhole, their long necks stretching to reach the water's surface. The smell of wet earth and the faint scent of the animal's natural musk filled the air, creating a rich tapestry of sensory experiences. Emily and Mark, who had been eagerly anticipating this moment, were deeply moved by the beauty and tranquility of the scene. Emily, with her journal in hand, began to write down her thoughts, trying to capture the emotions of the moment. The gentle breeze carried the fresh, earthy aroma of the bush, mixed with the occasional hint of the sweet, floral scent of nearby blossoms. Mark, his eyes wide with awe, took in the panoramic view, feeling a profound sense of connection with nature. He was especially amazed at how many animals seemed to pop into view now that they were sitting still in one spot and observing intently. Each time he looked back at a spot he had already glanced over before, he seemed to notice new animals he missed the first time around. As the group observed, Greg shared his knowledge of the waterhole's significance. He explained how it served as a vital resource for wildlife during the dry season, drawing animals from miles around. His voice was a calm, steady presence amidst the natural symphony, blending seamlessly with the sounds of the bush. The heat of the day continued to rise, and the sun's rays became more intense. The group, feeling the warmth on their skin, began to reach for their water bottles. The taste of the water was refreshing, a crisp contrast to the earthy richness of the surrounding environment. As the day progressed, the sun reached its zenith, casting dark shadows and creating a shimmering effect on the waterhole. The light played tricks on the eyes, making the water appear almost like liquid gold. The animals continued to come and go, each interaction a testament to the interconnectedness of life in the bush. The emotions of the group were a blend of exhilaration and tranquility. The thrill of witnessing such close interactions with wildlife was tempered by the serene beauty of the landscape. Each of them felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to experience the wild in such an intimate and unfiltered way. Greg, observing the group's reactions, felt a deep satisfaction at being able to share his passion with a group that could appreciate it for what it was. The success of the morning's adventure was evident in the group's wide-eyed wonder and the animated discussions about their observations. The peaceful moments at the waterhole had provided a perfect balance to the excitement of the game drive, reinforcing the magical allure of the African bush. As the sun began its slow descent, casting a warm amber glow across the savannah, Greg decided it was time to start heading back. The group, their senses fully engaged and their spirits high, climbed back into the vehicle with a renewed appreciation for the wild beauty of the reserve. The journey back was filled with reflective conversation, each member of the group savoring the memories of a morning well spent amidst the splendor of Africa's untamed heart. Greg, calmly participating in the conversation, kept a keen eye on the surrounding bush to ensure the safety of his guests. As they approached the vehicle, Greg suggested a walking safari to offer a closer and more immersive experience with the bush. Walking safaris were commonplace in the reserve and often seen as the ultimate way to experience the true essence of the bush. The group agreed enthusiastically, and they prepared to leave the vehicle behind for a while. The group ventured into the bush, the ground beneath their feet a mix of dry leaves and cracked soil. Greg cautioned everyone to watch their step, as terrain can be tricky, especially when you are not paying attention. The scenery was incredible, and everyone in the group realized that they could see so much more detail from this vantage point. The heat was beginning to intensify, the sun's rays casting shimmering heat waves across the savanna. The air was filled with the faint rustle of the wind through the grass and the occasional chirp of insects. Greg led the way with practiced ease, his senses finely attuned to the environment. He pointed out animal tracks, explaining their significance and the stories they told about the creatures that had passed through. The group moved cautiously, their excitement tempered by the realization that they were now part of the wild, their senses heightened by the proximity to nature. Greg led the group along a well-trodden path. The dry leaves and twigs beneath their feet crunched softly with each step, and the scent of the savanna, earthy and slightly sweet with the hint of sun-baked grasses, enveloped them. Occasionally, a gentle breeze carried the sharp, musky odor of animal dung, a reminder of the wildlife that roamed freely in the reserve and, in fact, all around them at this point. The group, while exhilarated by their close proximity to nature, was also aware of the inherent risks of a walking safari. The intensity of the heat and the awareness of their vulnerability in the open made each step feel significant. Greg's calm and assured presence was a source of reassurance for the four, his voice a soothing guide as he shared his knowledge of the flora and fauna surrounding them. Sarah, always the keen observer, adjusted her hat to shield her eyes from the sun. Her camera hung from her neck, at the ready to take that perfect shot. She took in the vast expanse of the landscape, the colors shifting subtly as the sun's position changed. Tom, her partner, walked beside her, his gaze scanning the underbrush for signs of wildlife. The excitement of seeing animals up close was tempered by a growing awareness of the potential dangers. He felt a thrill at the thought of encountering something extraordinary, yet a thread of anxiety wove through his excitement. The taste of his sweat on his lips was a tangible reminder of the day's exertion. Emily and Mark, equally enthralled and cautious, followed Greg's lead. Emily, her journal in hand, occasionally scribbled notes about their surroundings and her observations. The heat was stifling, and she took frequent sips from her water bottle, the cool liquid a fleeting comfort against the sun's relentless blaze. Meanwhile, I stayed close to Emily, my eyes scanning the horizon with a mixture of wonder and, well, a bit of apprehension. As they rounded a bend in the path, the group emerged into a small clearing surrounded by dense vegetation. The clearing was a peaceful spot, the midday light filtering through the trees and casting a dappled glow on the ground. The air was filled with the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds. It was a serene moment, the calmness of the environment creating a sense of tranquility. However, this tranquility was about to be shattered. Unbeknownst to the group, a Cape buffalo, one of Africa's most formidable and unpredictable creatures, had been resting in the shaded thicket nearby. The buffalo had been disturbed by their presence, and its mood was now dangerously agitated. The dense vegetation provided enough cover to conceal the animal's presence from the unsuspecting group. As the group continued into the clearing, the buffalo's sharp eyes locked onto them. The scent of the group, a mix of sunscreen, sweat, and the faint aroma of their snacks, mingled with the natural smells of the bush. The buffalo's irritation grew as it perceived the humans as a threat. Its massive body tensed, readying for a defensive response. The first sign of danger was the sudden silence that fell over the clearing. The usual sounds of the bush, the chirping of birds, the rustle of the wind, seemed to fade into a tense hush. Greg, sensing something amiss, began to slow his pace. His senses heightened. His experienced eyes scanned the surroundings, but the buffalo remained concealed, its presence still undetected by the group. Without warning, the buffalo charged. The sheer force of the animal's movement was sudden and overwhelming. The group's initial reaction was one of stunned disbelief. The buffalo's massive form burst forth from the underbrush with an explosive burst of energy. Its hooves pounded the ground, creating a thunderous noise that seemed to reverberate through the clearing. The impact was brutal. Greg was lifted off the ground by the force of the buffalo's horns, the sheer power of the animal's charge sending him flying through the air and crashing to the earth. The sound of the buffalo's heavy breathing and snorting along with the thud of its hooves against the ground filled the air, creating a cacophony of violence and chaos. Sarah's blood-curdling screams cut through the tumult, her voice filled with terror as she and Tom scrambled back toward the path that leads to their vehicle. The fear in their voices as they shouted and screamed at the buffalo while retreating was palpable, their faces etched with shock and terror. The taste of adrenaline was sharp in their mouths as they fled, their movements frantic and disjointed. Emily and Mark, frozen in place, watched in horror as the scene unfolded. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, their hearts pounding in their chests, creating an almost painful sensation. The air was thick with the acrid smell of blood, mingling with the earthy scent of the savanna and the sharp odor of the buffalo's musk. The heat of the day seemed to intensify, the sun's rays beating down on them as they struggled to comprehend the unfolding disaster. The clearing, once a peaceful haven, was now a scene of devastation. Greg lay on the ground bloodied and unconscious, his breathing shallow and labored. The group, still in shock, managed to call for help. Their voices, though shaky, were determined as they relayed their situation to the reserve's emergency services. The once serene landscape now seemed charged with a palpable sense of urgency and fear. The realization of their vulnerability in the wild was stark and sobering. Within minutes that felt like an eternity, a rescue team arrived at the scene. The sound of approaching vehicles and the sight of uniformed medical personnel brought a sense of urgency to the once peaceful surroundings. The team quickly assessed Greg's condition, their voices and movements a flurry of activity as they worked to stabilize him. Greg's injuries were severe, and the rescue team worked with practiced precision to provide first aid. The initial impact of the buffalo's charge involved a violent goring with its horns. One of the buffalo's horns struck Greg with a crushing force, causing significant trauma to the right side of his head. The blow resulted in a deep laceration extending from his forehead down to his cheek, exposing underlying tissues and causing extensive bleeding. Greg's face was grotesquely swollen and disfigured, the skin around the injury turning a deep purple and black from bruising. The force also caused a concussion, evident from the disorientation and unconsciousness that followed the attack. The buffalo's horns also inflicted severe injuries to Greg's chest and torso. The impact caused multiple rib fractures, leading to sharp, intense pain and difficulty in breathing. The force of the goring left deep, penetrating wounds in his upper chest, with blood seeping through the torn fabric of his shirt and pooling around him. The trauma to the chest resulted in contusions and internal bleeding, which added to the life-threatening nature of his condition. Greg's abdomen was struck by the animal's horns with such force that it resulted in internal injuries. The impact caused several internal organs to be bruised or damaged, leading to abdominal pain and swelling. The internal bleeding, though not immediately visible, was a serious concern as it could lead to further complications such as shock or organ failure if not addressed promptly. Greg's legs and pelvis were also affected by the attack. The buffalo's powerful charge caused significant trauma to his lower body, including a fractured pelvis. The fractures in the pelvic region resulted in excruciating pain and limited mobility. The impact also caused severe bruising and swelling in both legs, with deep lacerations and abrasions from contact with the buffalo's hooves. The injuries rendered Greg unable to move his lower body, further complicating the rescue efforts. The combined effect of the injuries resulted in a significant loss of blood. Greg's condition was compounded by shock, a life-threatening response to the trauma that affected his heart rate, blood pressure, and overall physiological stability. The severe bleeding from his wounds, coupled with the shock, made his condition critical and required immediate and comprehensive medical intervention. In addition to the primary injuries caused by the buffalo's horns, Greg also sustained secondary injuries from the fall and the subsequent struggle. The rough terrain contributed to abrasions and contusions on his body, and the prolonged exposure to the sun while unconscious led to further dehydration and heat-related issues. The combination of these injuries presented a complex and dangerous medical scenario. Greg's immediate medical treatment focused on stabilizing his condition, controlling the bleeding, and managing the pain. His injuries required a coordinated effort from the rescue team, who had to work swiftly and efficiently to transport him to a medical facility where he could receive the specialized care needed for his recovery. The rescue operation involved carefully moving Greg to a safe location where he could be airlifted to a nearby hospital. The noise of the helicopter's rotor blades and the sight of the medical team working to secure Greg in the stretcher added to the frenetic energy of the moment. The group, their emotions a mix of fear and helplessness, struggled to process the events that had transpired. As Greg was airlifted away, the remaining members of the group were left to grapple with the aftermath of the attack. The once bustling waterhole now felt eerily quiet. The earlier sounds of wildlife replaced by the echoes of their own stunned voices. The serenity of the bush had been shattered, and the group's sense of adventure had been replaced by a profound awareness of nature's raw power. As Greg Gilbert was airlifted from the scene of the attack, his condition was critical. The helicopter, its rotors slicing through the hot air, carried him to the nearest medical facility with urgency. Upon arrival at the medical facility, Greg was met with a flurry of activity. The trauma team, comprised of skilled doctors and nurses, worked swiftly to assess and stabilize his condition. Many of the injuries he sustained from the Cape Buffalo required immediate and comprehensive medical intervention. Surgeons performed a series of reconstructive procedures to repair the extensive lacerations and restore the structural integrity of his face. The concussion and internal bleeding were addressed with careful monitoring and supportive care. Greg's fractured ribs were stabilized with splints and pain management, while his pelvic fractures required surgical intervention to realign and stabilize the bones. Internal bleeding was a major concern, and Greg underwent emergency procedures to control the hemorrhage and repair damaged organs. The team's efforts were focused on stabilizing his condition and preventing complications such as shock or organ failure. The days following Greg's evacuation were marked by a cautious optimism tempered by the seriousness of his condition. The immediate dangers were significant. The risk of infection from the deep wounds, combined with the internal trauma, presented a constant threat to his recovery. The extensive blood loss had left him weak and vulnerable, requiring constant monitoring and support. Greg was placed in an intensive care unit, where he was closely monitored for any signs of complications. The pain from his injuries was managed with a combination of medications, and the medical team provided him with nutritional support to aid in his recovery. The emotional toll of the attack was also addressed, with counseling offered to help him cope with the trauma and anxiety stemming from the incident. As the weeks passed, Greg's condition gradually stabilized. The initial focus was on ensuring that he remained free from infection and that his internal injuries healed properly. Physical therapy was introduced to help him regain strength and mobility, particularly as he recovered from the pelvic fractures and rib injuries. Slowly, he began to regain his strength and mobility. The road to recovery was long and arduous, but Greg's determination and the support of his loved ones played a crucial role in his progress. Despite the successful medical interventions, Greg was left with visible and lasting reminders of the attack. The deep lacerations on his face healed, but left behind scars that were a permanent testament to the ferocity of the Cape Buffalo's charge. His once smooth skin was marked by prominent scars running from his forehead to his cheek, a stark reminder of the danger he had faced. The fractures in his ribs and pelvis healed with time, but they left behind lingering aches and stiffness that reminded him of the attack. His physical scars were a part of his daily life, serving as a constant reminder of the safari that took a perilous turn. However, they also became symbols of his survival and resilience. Emotionally, the scars were accompanied by a heightened awareness of the risks associated with the wild. Greg's experience deepened his understanding of the raw power of nature and the unpredictable nature of wildlife encounters. The trauma left him with a sense of humility and respect for the creatures he had dedicated his life to studying. In the years following the attack, Greg's life gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy. He continued his work as a safari guide, albeit with a new perspective on safety and risk management. His experience became an important part of his story, a cautionary tale for others about the unpredictability of the wild and the importance of respect and vigilance. Greg used his story as a teaching tool, sharing his experience with safari guests and emphasizing the importance of understanding and respecting wildlife. His scars became a part of his narrative, a visual testament to his survival and his dedication to the natural world. And that brings us to the end of this edition. If you have come this far, Thank you so much, and please support our channel by liking and subscribing if you have not done so yet. Till next time.